And now for something completely different.
Forget everything you've been told by others before. Get ready for the real deal, the full story, real talk about money, markets, life. Now, it's The Real Investment Show, presented by RIA Advisors.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to The Real Investment Show, Financial Fitness Fridays. I am today's host, Jonathan McCarty, joined in the studio by my colleague, Matt Doyle. Good morning, Matt. How are you?
Good morning.
I appreciate you being here for my maiden voyage here at the helm. Hopefully there are no icebergs on the horizon. We're looking at you, Larry. And of course, joined by the guy who's really at the helm, the smoothest voice in radio, Brent Clanton. Good morning, Brent. How are you, sir? All right, so we got some interesting news out last night from China. They are apparently considering having talks, so they're thinking about talking with the United States around a trade agreement. Matt, what do you think about that? China has come out pretty strong, saying that they're not going to bend the knee. They're, I think, coming from a position of strength. What do you make of this recent news headline?
Well, I mean, I'm reminded of the quote from Art of War, which is, wait by the river long enough and the body of your enemy will float by. And these folks can play the long game, and they have been for forever, right, since the British were occupying Hong Kong. And they know what they're doing. So are they an adversary? For sure, but not to be underestimated.
I think you're right. I think that they've come out very strongly saying they're not going to bow to Trump. They want to show a position of strength. So constantly putting out that notion that the U.S. is coming to them wanting to talk about trade, it gives them that positional bargaining power of coming from the individual calling the shots. And I think that after the comments that J.D. Vance made about the Chinese people, I think there's a little bit of pride involved there. They want to make sure that they are given the respect that they feel they earned on the international stage.
Sure.
So we've got some reports coming out today. April jobs report is due out here in about an hour and change. Expectations about 133,000. We'll see where we come in on that. Futures right now, based off of the news out of China and the reports from Apple and Amazon last night, are up slightly. Amazon and Apple both reported decent earnings but gave some mixed guidance. I think that's starting to show emerging cracks in consumer trends. McDonald's also came out with some very weak sales recently. So we're starting to see some economic data that's giving us a little clearer insight into what's going on with the American consumer and how they're responding to this tariff war that we find ourselves in. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. Let's see what we've got on the economic calendar. We also got the factory payroll coming out. Factory orders coming out later this morning. That'll be also interesting insight into how we're going to navigate these tariffs. We've got some consumer caution signs mount. So we've got McDonald's joining popular brands like Starbucks and Chipotle, showing the weakness here, like we talked about. Question for all three companies is whether macroeconomic environment issues can stop their own brand challenges start. Now, we've seen Starbucks recently come out and say that their shift to automation has been a mistake, and now they're trying to get back to their original company culture of having the baristas, that Starbucks hangout experience, which is a nice change from the shift we've seen recently going more towards a fast service model and even not encouraging people to come and hang out in their stores anymore. So we'll see how that goes as well. Been a pretty interesting week in the markets. We've seen quite a bit of growth going back and forth. What do you expect is heading into the weekend? Anything on your mind, Matt, as far as unexpected surprises we may see?
Well, I mean, the big surprise that's out there, I think, Lance is going to participate this afternoon on Fox Business. So tune into that, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. And we'll see what impact that has on the market, I think.
Yep, and Lance is out of the office, so chances are it's going to tank, but you are correct. He's going to be on the show with Charles Payne today. If you guys are interested, please check that out on Fox Business. But as we know, anytime Lance is out of the office, it's always a coin flip to see what's going to be happening in the market. So hopefully things remain on a positive trend. We'd like to end this week strong. But with the recent bull trend we've currently found ourselves in, it is coming up now on some resistance levels. We're going to be approaching on the 100-day, 200-day moving averages. We'll see if we can break above that, break out of this trend. But if not, expect to see some further resistance from those levels, potentially pushing things back down in the markets. So in other news, we've got Tesla that came out, which I thought was very interesting when I heard this headline. They came out and announced that they're in the search for a new CEO. That has since been debunked. I was pretty shocked. I did not think that Elon would be giving up the helm of his flagship company so easily, which recently has come out and been debunked. The board of directors, Robin DeHolm, forcefully denied that report from the Wall Street Journal late on Wednesday that they had begun looking for a new CEO. Musk, as controversial as the guy is, he is the CEO of multiple companies at the same time. Also, his involvement with Doge has actually caused him to take a step back after Tesla's faltering earnings, which shockingly, even with the negative earnings that they experienced, their stock seems to be on a rally. What do you make of that, Matt?
I don't know. It's kind of odd that, Tesla's becoming a meme stock.
Yeah.
I mean, the markets are so sensitive these days to headlines, and somebody who's clever goes up and posts up a photo with a clever caption, and all of a sudden there's a swing in the markets. It's just new territory for me. I got to admit, I'm not a big social media guy, but it seems like anybody that is clever enough can really manipulate things, and it's hard to navigate. That's why always we talk about fundamentals. We talk about direction, try to get clarity on what's the outlook in the market, right? In keeping with the themes, right? We think that rates are going to go down. What's going to happen with these trade wars and things of that nature? Michael Leibowitz put out last Wednesday a great article on the website that was talking about the three possibilities, right? Up, down, and sideways. And sort of our approach to how we're going to handle or the approach to thinking about how to implement a strategy given what the market's going to give us. And we're just in that phase. We're in the phase of, not only digesting whatever whirlwind is happening in the news cycle, but also the fundamentals of what's happening with reporting. And this is a big week for reporting. Right, a lot of companies are coming out with their earnings reports, and as you mentioned, McDonald's missed, which was a surprise. So we just have to see what way in these tariffs have, and then of course, as you know, there was a clawback on some of the automotive tariffs, and so I think there's an understanding now that we can't just ready, fire, aim at all of this, and it needs to be more surgical. So hopefully there's a calming of the market. I think the late night tweets have kind of stopped a little bit, and that's helpful. But in the end, we want to be in a position where we're adaptable and can take whatever's thrown at us from a market standpoint.
Yeah, I would agree. It feels like there's just a lot of tension in this market as people are waiting to get economic data to support one direction or the other as far as where things are going to be headed. And when you get that kind of tension, you see a lot of this volatility. We've got multiple percent point swings up and down each way over the last few weeks here. It's not what you would expect historically to see as far as volatility heading into the slower months of summer. So when we get back, we'll talk about some of the recent changes in consumer habits and the American debt levels and where we're headed, hitting all-time highs for consumer debt in the United States. Is that concerning? We'll find out when we get back. Thanks very much, guys.
Get daily investment news you can use, delivered at the speed of the internet at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Our next edition of Candid Coffee features special guest RIA Portfolio Manager Michael Leibowitz for an insightful look at the bond market, interest rates, and the outlook for your money. Saturday, May 3rd. It's an open chat edition of Candid Coffee with Michael Leibowitz and Richard Rosso. Register today at realinvestmentadvice.com and submit your questions for Michael and Rich. Candid Coffee with Leibowitz and Rosso. Saturday, May 3rd at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Attention Chevron employees and anyone else receiving or considering a company severance package. We know the process can be intimidating. What should you know to maximize your payout? Lump sum or pension annuity, retirement plan rollover or not? What about tax timing your severance? The fiduciary advisors at RIA Advisors can help you make the best decisions for your situation. Call us today at 855-742-7526. That's 855-742-PLAN. Or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
The Real Investment Show.
RIA Advisors Research is the envy of the industry. Our economic insights are featured on advisorperspectives.com, Fox Business, and MarketWatch. RIA provides advisors with marketing and back office support, objective research, and holistic, cutting-edge financial planning tools to meet your clients' needs. Want to join a winning team and be part of a fiduciary culture where you can do your best work? Then why haven't you contacted us yet? Go to our confidential advisor hub at realinvestmentadvice.com. RIA Advisors. Big enough where it matters, agile enough when it counts.
And now, another page from the Real Investment Advisors Investing Manifesto. Manage risk and volatility rather than trying to manage gains. You don't have to be right all the time. Long-term investing success is a 70% gain. Let us help you reach your financial goals with RIA Advisors. Neither bull nor bear. RIA Advisors, 281-501-1791 or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
Welcome back to the Real Investment Show, Financial Fitness Friday. So before the break, we were talking about futures markets, some of the weakness we've seen in reported earnings. But let's jump to a topic that Lance touched on a little earlier this week, and that is the trend that's emerging for buy now, pay later services. Now, we've seen this for historically big ticket items, but a recent study that came out shows that 25% of buy now, pay later users are actually using this for groceries. So we're seeing some shifts in consumer behavior that are kind of highlighting the economic strain that a lot of American families are under. You know, when you're trying to finance things like your basic essentials, I think that shows a real problem in the overall economy that maybe is being overlooked, and this could be the canary in the coal mine that that many are not considering looking at. Matt, what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, I got to say, I'm not really sure how much of it is anecdotal versus factual. You know, I think companies are trying to adapt as best they can and offer as many options as they can to their customers. You know, we saw in the past with companies like Dillard's and Home Depot and things like this that they eventually became a credit card company. Like Dillard's was really existing on their credit card interest rates and giving away clothing. And that got them into trouble, and Home Depot got into the same problem. So, you know, back to your point, when we have companies that are, you know, rolling out extra layaways or doing things like this, I'm not sure. I haven't seen any data in terms of how many people are actually taking that. Have you? I mean, what's the interpretation, or what's the application, I should say, of people actually taking advantage of those offerings?
You know, I'd say it shows that people are reticent to give up their cash. You know, anytime you're trying to finance anything, it's a desire to hold on to more cash. I think that's reflected in times of economic uncertainty. You know, people try and stretch out their cash conversion cycle, right? If I can get a few more months of holding on to this in case something unexpected happens, they're going to take advantage of that. I think that it also shows just general weakness in employment. You know, it's highlighting that wages are not really keeping up with inflation for most normal goods. People are looking at more creative ways of financing their lifestyles. And when it gets into things like essentials such as groceries, I think that should ring some alarm bells in a lot of economists' heads that something is not right. And if we don't correct course, we're going to see this condition continue to get worse and continue to deteriorate. Recently, we've hit all-time highs in debt in the United States, just over $18 trillion in debt. And of course, credit cards make up the biggest portion of that debt. So a recent article from MarketWatch highlighted that about 45.2% of U.S. households carry credit card debt versus only about 40% that have a mortgage. So, when we're looking at good debt versus bad debt, obviously, asset-backed debt is not that there's really any good debt and as a financial advisor, but having asset-backed debt is definitely the better type of debt to have. And as Lance has said, he'll always have a mortgage on his property because it's an attractive form of debt for him. But when you're looking at credit cards being the largest segment of debt in the U.S. economy, I think that shows that people are struggling and that they're really feeling it on their bottom line. And so until we see wages kind of pick up and things settle down in the economy, I think we're going to continue to see this trend get worse.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of run into this in terms of planning, and we have this conversation with folks quite a bit, which is, lifestyle tends to increase over time. Right. Mm-hmm. When you're a kid, you can live off ramen and rolling pennies for gas, or whatever. You can do that. And then as we get older and, our lifestyle increases, that's great. And if you have a disruption level event or a high inflation environment, it's very difficult to adjust lifestyle and go backwards. I have seen a few folks over my career that have been able to do it successfully. But it's very difficult. Some clients come in and they just don't know where the money goes, right? They have no idea of where to spend it or where they're spending it. And tools like these kind of make it easy. We were working with a client and, helping her on the budgeting side. And she says, I had no idea until you asked me, Matt, what all of these monthly sort of deductions or charges were going on in my credit card. I just didn't pay attention. And all of a sudden, there's an extra $500-600 a month that she's able to save because, I turned on LinkedIn Gold or whatever, and I don't need that, right? Or I had this recurring subscription that, I just forgot about.
Yeah.
And so you get into that trap, and debt's the same way. It's really easy to go out and say I need this when you need to be able to distinguish between what your need is and what your want is. But when you get that lifestyle set, when you get used to living a particular way, it's very hard to change that, especially going in reverse. So something's got to break. I don't know how far the American consumer is able to tighten their belt at this point, because it seems like inflation has just deteriorated a lot of their spending power.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the right answer is, but I would caution people against these, payday loan things and these other quick money type deals because the interest rates that they're going to charge you are just exorbitant.
It's loan shark level. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Is that lifestyle tends to maintain, and that's, as financial advisors, one of the biggest things that we plan for is what you expect your lifestyle to be in retirement. And most individuals approaching retirement kind of have that mindset of, I'd like to maintain my same standard of living. That's kind of their baseline, and it really goes up from there. So that can be drastically impacted by things like debt levels. So, 1 in 5 households in the United States right now has education debt. Now, that's partially because of the massive increase we've seen in the cost of higher education, but it's more common now for parents, even grandparents, to be helping out the younger generations with education costs. And what that really translates to is a lack of additional purchasing power for individuals who are at or very near retirement. And that ultimately is going to lead to conversations around how are we going to reestablish your routines, your baseline into a level that's comfortable based off of your current financial situation. So I think that also the interesting part about this report from MarketWatch is that debt levels vary by region. It was not a surprise to me that Washington, D.C. came in at the top of the list with an average debt level of $104,000. And anybody who works in government understands it takes a lot of education, and the pay is not that great unless, of course, you're a lobbyist, in which case you're a very happy individual living in Washington, D.C. So I think that it's going to highlight a need for Americans to prioritize, I think is the key word there. Prioritize what's important to you. What are the things that you're looking for in retirement that are must-haves? What are things that are going to be nice-to-haves? And then let's look at the economic backdrop that's going to be able to either support or not support those goals. And how are we going to modify your current investment approach to ensure we're going to have the highest degree of certainty of achieving those goals?
Right. Well, I mean, look, from like a career path standpoint, just say a normal experience might be, you start in your career and you develop and you slowly get raises and you get bonuses or whatever that might be. But your income increases over your career, hopefully. And it's really easy to ratchet up lifestyle. And one, I don't know if it's a trick. I don't know that I'd call it a trick, but a recommendation that I would give to clients is to say, look, as that increases, yes, increase your lifestyle to a certain degree, but also increase your savings. Correct. Because you're going to need that in your back pocket when you're 75, 80, whatever it is. Because you're either going to have to learn to love cat food or you're going to have to go be a greeter at Walmart. I don't know what the answer is, but you got to pay yourself first. And to the extent that we do planning and forecasting, and again, we have very conservative estimates in terms of what our forecasting models rely on. But there are clients where they've done very well, and they might be able to go out and buy that really expensive car, but they're not. They're going to go buy a Honda because that's the lifestyle that they've been accustomed to. That's their thing. And so we'll tell them, hey, look, you have this legacy potential here. What do you want to do with that? And some will say, I'd rather see the kids while they're young and starting their families. I'd rather see them be able to enjoy that now, help them get a leg up now. Or to your point, help with the grandkids' education or whatever that might be. We have a client where we're working with them, and their son-in-law has, I think it's 17% on his student loans.
Wow.
It's just ludicrous.
Did he get those from Discover?
He got him from the Loan Shark and Bait Shoppy down the street.
Yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point. As your career progresses, you make more and more, and then it's time to reevaluate where your spending goes. The typical 50, 30, 20 rule that we hear so often in financial planning, it's very different for somebody who's just coming out of college early in their career. I started my career in Southern California, and 50% is supposed to go to your essentials, all essentials. In Los Angeles, it's not uncommon for people to be spending 50% of their income on rent alone. Right. Not to mention the remaining portions of your essentials that you need. So, following these traditional guidelines around, what you should be doing for financial planning also is largely dependent upon where you're at in your career, where you're at in the country, what part of the country you're living in, because high cost of living areas obviously going to impact your ability to set those funds aside. But also to your point, Matt, as you're growing and advancing in your career, you should be reevaluating those amounts that you're spending in those different categories to make sure they're still in line with what your needs are, and also allowing for you to put funds aside for your future, for the rainy day. I think that the lack of savings for individuals in the United States is really going to come to a head when you look at the majority of individuals now approaching retirement age don't really have anything saved outside of Social Security. Yeah. Social Security was never meant to be your entire retirement. It was supposed to be a supplement, but so many people are now counting on it as their only source of income in retirement. It's really going to be a challenge for those who have not adequately prepared. So when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about some insights from Deloitte as far as consumer sentiment and their purchasing powers. Thank you very much for watching The Real Investment Show. We'll see you when you get back.
The Real Investment Advice blog. It's required reading for the informed investor. Catch it today at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Our next edition of Candid Coffee features special guest RIA Portfolio Manager Michael Leibowitz for an insightful look at the bond market, interest rates, and the outlook for your money. Saturday, May 3rd. It's an open chat edition of Candid Coffee with Michael Leibowitz and Richard Rosso. Register today at realinvestmentadvice.com and submit your questions for Michael and Rich. Candid Coffee with Leibowitz and Rosso. Saturday, May 3rd at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Are you a financial advisor sneaking peeks at our stuff? Instead of trying to do it all yourself, why not just join the team at RIA Advisors? Our full-service organization can provide you with the support, unparalleled research, and tools for managing your clients' money and honoring the fiduciary pledge of putting clients' best interests first. Don't take our word for it. Talk to the advisors that work with us. Want to come win with us? Go to our confidential advisor hub at realinvestmentadvice.com. RIA Advisors, big enough where it matters, agile enough when it counts.
The Real Investment Show.
Attention Chevron employees and anyone else receiving or considering a company severance package. We know the process can be intimidating. What should you know to maximize your payout? Lump sum or pension annuity, retirement plan rollover or not? What about tax timing your severance? The fiduciary advisors at RIA Advisors can help you make the best decisions for your situation. Call us today at 855-742-7526. That's 855-742-PLAN. Or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Can't catch the whole show now? Listen to our podcast later at realinvestmentadvice.com.
I've never seen so many economists and financial people become epidemiologists in my entire life, right?
It's a Christmas miracle.
I know, right?
If your choice is death or listen to Lance Roberts, I'm sure I might win at least 20% of those.
Listen to the Real Investment Show podcast from your favorite service. Same show, your schedule at realinvestmentadvice.com.
And now, another page from the Real Investment Advisors Investing Manifesto. Bulls win in bull markets. Bears win in bear markets. Eagles soar above and take advantage of opportunity. Let us help you soar as you reach your financial goals with RIA Advisors. Neither bull nor bear. RIA Advisors, 281-501-1791 or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
The Real Investment Show.
If you're working and looking to retire soon, a Medicare special enrollment period is in your future. Understanding Medicare choices, enrollment deadlines, and costs are essential to your overall standard of living in retirement. The wrong choices can cost you thousands in penalties. Make sense of Medicare's alphabet soup with RIA Advisors' online resources and one-on-one partners to help secure the healthcare insurance choice that is right for your lifestyle and budget and avoid gaps in coverage. Click on the insurance tab at realinvestmentadvice.com today. realinvestmentadvice.com.
The Real Investment Show YouTube channel has all our videos ready for your easy access. Now with the new and improved Before the Bell reports, plus each day's radio shows. Subscribe and bookmark our YouTube channel at realinvestmentadvice.com.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
Where is Rich?
Welcome back to the Real Investment Show. I'm your host, John McCarty. Thanks very much for joining us, guys. So before the break, we were talking about some changes in consumer spending habits. And recently here, Deloitte, they put out a number of different insights around consumer behavior. The food frugality behaviors, talking about Americans spending with buy now, pay later for groceries. And what that data really means. So we've got Deloitte coming out saying about 40% of individuals plan on saving funds on groceries by reducing at-home food waste. Another 30% will switch to purchasing the store-bought brands or lower-cost ingredients. And then another 27% about buying only essentials, lower-cost meats or cuts. So maybe instead of that filet mignon, you're looking at a top sirloin. Or just buying less than what you originally wanted. You know, that's another of the economic forces, is just not participating at all. What do you make of these trends, Matt? Any concerns about how we're going to be making these adjustments and how that's going to impact market performance going into the end of the year?
I mean, I can't speak to how it's going to impact the market, but I think, food waste in general is just something we've always struggled with.
Yeah.
Cruises are an excellent example of that. I don't know how much food they order and throw away.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, at some point, and I'm not one to talk. I mean, I've never missed a meal in my life, but but yeah, I mean, I've been trying. I don't know for folks that have been following me on the show in my little weight loss experiment here, but I'm working at it. But yeah, I think there is a sort of, you know, expectation maybe Americans have had that, you know, there was always a bounty, that there was always a plenty, and now we're finding that may not be the case going forward. So what is it? Is it a new tomorrow? I'm not sure, but you know, companies are going to have to adjust and things of that sort too. I don't know. Maybe some of these companies will have to lower their buybacks, you know, and not buy as much stock back, and instead, you know, invest in capital infrastructure and building their business out. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the interesting change here, you know, switching your purchasing from, you know, higher quality food products to lower quality products, you know, that's one easy solution. But I think it also highlights the change in sentiment. So another part of that Deloitte Insights data there is that splurge purchases, right? So how many individuals in the last month made at least one splurge purchase? And, you know, 69% of the people who responded to their survey admitted in making a splurge purchase, but 37% of them considered their splurge purchase to be food. So now, you know, it's not that they're going out and buying that new shirt or that new dress, or, you know, maybe going in and getting that car they wanted. They're now considering splurging as buying a higher quality cut of meat. So I think that really highlights that people are tightening their belts. There's still a lot of economic concerns around where things are headed, and the consumer behaviors are going to follow that trend.
Yeah, and I don't know if it still rings true, but I mean, I think, you know, at least in my situation it did, and I think in a lot of younger kids it did, you know. There was a time when you wanted grandma's tea set and you wanted that. And it seems like nowadays younger people in particular, are more focused on the experience or I don't know what the right word is, but they would rather spend the money on a trip or a good meal than they would, you know, a fine couch, right? They're fine with the IKEA cardboard couch. You know, they don't really care so much about that. They don't want grandma's silver tea set. They want to go out and enjoy their life and experience stuff. So, I mean, I don't know so much if it's a demographic shift or if it's an economic choice that people are making, but there is definitely a shift.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there is a definite shift in the younger generations, and that experiences over possessions trend, I think, is likely to continue. That's really been prevalent ever since social media really took off, and you've got now all these influencers that talk about, oh, we're traveling here, we're putting pictures up here. You know, people want to emulate what they see, and when you're a younger individual in this country and you're glued to social media, all you're seeing is all these people who are very successful, who are traveling. And so they say, you know, look, I want to do those things. I want to do those traveling things. I think it's highlighting a change in trends among the younger generation. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is the change in how younger generations are investing and when they start investing. So, you know, Vice came out recently with an article that now teens and young adults are using AI for investment decisions. You know, I don't know how well that's going to work out, considering some of the experiences I've seen with the language learning models, and one of the new iterations of ChatGPT was already pulled because of the quick rabbit hole that it went down. But, you know, Charles Schwab put out a wealth survey showing that the average Gen Z investor is now buying stocks at the age of 19, compared to millennials at 25 and Gen X at 32. Now, that's, I got to say, pretty in line. I'm a millennial, and I bought my first stocks after I graduated from college and got into the industry, and I was about 25, a little under, but that's pretty close to the average. You know, Matt, when did you buy your first security?
Oh, I'm still waiting. I lost my securities in the divorce.
Yeah. You know, sometimes it's cheaper to keep her. So, well, hopefully you get that experience here soon, Matt. I definitely get it. I think that it also highlights, you know, just a trend in what we're seeing in the job market. You know, the gap, the new grad gap. Actually, this came out recently. is higher than the unemployment gap. The new grad gap is basically the unemployment level for new recent college graduates versus the overall unemployment level in the U.S. economy. And right now, unemployment's sitting around 4% for nationally for the overall economy, but the new grad gap unemployment level is about 5.8%. So again, highlighting further economic weakness in the United States and in the job market in particular. We've also seen this AI, on the topic of AI. Companies are now opting to hire AI to do some of these entry-level tasks. And so it's funny, what we're talking about, the supply chain for labor is going to be disrupted here, because typically, you get out of college, you get an entry-level job, you kind of earn your stripes, you do a lot of grunt work, you crunch a lot of numbers, and you build those foundational skills necessary to advance in your career. Well, what happens if you take the bottom rung off of that ladder and replace it by AI? Now you've got a job market gap that's filled by AI, but now the new incoming labor pool isn't able to build those skills necessary to then apply for the jobs at the middle senior level roles, because they haven't built those foundational skills. And I think that amplifies a shift in the overall labor market that I don't know that the country is prepared for. What do you think on that, Matt?
Well, I mentioned 1 or 2 shows ago that I was on with Rich about how the economy shifted from an agrarian sort of economy to an industrialized economy, and that was a major disruptor. And there's always a disruptor around the corner. I mean, the way I look at it is these folks are just going to have to get retrained to do something else.
Yeah.
It's not that these jobs go away and there's massive unemployment for forever. They just find something else to do. I don't know what the next job is. Hopefully we have smart people, engineers and scientists and brilliant folks out there that go and invent things and are creative and define whatever that next level is. But people generally, I think, don't like to be idle. I think if you sit there for too long, you'll eventually find something to do. And in an economy such as ours is structured, you're incentivized so that that's productive and you get paid for it. And so I don't know. To your point, these kids are going to find something else to do. They're going to find the next path. I think the last statistics that I saw was something like, I think a majority of the kids coming out of school, greater than 50%, were expecting to work for themselves. They weren't looking at the internship path that you or I might have enjoyed over the years, and then working up from the mailroom or whatever that might have been from our folks' generation. But they expect to go and I don't know, be an influencer. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think you're right. The younger generation is seeing this market that they're coming into, the employment market, and then they're not happy. They're being. I think the illusion is kind of wearing thin. And now, not even after high school, but even in high school, kids are now trying to make efforts to set themselves up for success as soon as they graduate, being their own boss. Like you said, Matt, being self-employed. Too many people are looking for get-rich-quick schemes. And I think that is definitely prevalent in the trading enthusiasm around things like cryptocurrency. Everybody wants to YOLO into a new meme coin, and I can make a 10 times return on this meme coin if I just throw $2,000 in here. But so many of those, the Hawk Tua girl, great example, and bless her, but she put out a Tua coin, right? The Hawk coin, I can't remember what they called it, but then basically rug pulled everybody. this coin shot up in value. She sold a huge portion of her holdings because she started the coin
pump and dump.
Exactly, yeah. and that's gotta sting as a young investor.
One of the things that is evolving is the resurgence of interest in the trades.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids don't want to go to college. They are perfectly happy learning a trade.
Yeah.
Auto mechanics, carpentry, you name it.
Yeah.
And a lot of the high schools, secondary education, are beginning to re-implement those programs into their curriculum. And I think that's a good trend.
Yeah. And a lot of things come full circle, right? Home ec, whatever. You don't really have to budget you don't have to pull out your checkbook anymore and do budgeting like you used to, or balancing your checkbook like you used to. Yeah. But there used to be consumerism classes. Here's how to be a smart consumer. Here's how to find a best deal. Here's how to do this. And I think there's a resurgence of that coming up.
I think you're right. We've seen a big increase of younger people participating in the capital markets, and we'll talk a little bit more about when we get back, and also financial literacy and its impact on your ability to be successful in life. Thanks very much.
Get daily investment news you can use, delivered at the speed of the internet at realinvestmentadvice.com.
Our next edition of Candid Coffee features special guest RIA Portfolio Manager Michael Leibowitz for an insightful look at the bond market, interest rates, and the outlook for your money. Saturday, May 3rd. It's an open chat edition of Candid Coffee with Michael Leibowitz and Richard Rosso. Register today at realinvestmentadvice.com and submit your questions for Michael and Rich. Candid Coffee with Leibowitz and Rosso. Saturday, May 3rd at realinvestmentadvice.com.
RIA Advisors Research is the envy of the industry. Our economic insights are featured on advisorperspectives.com, Fox Business, and MarketWatch. RIA provides advisors with marketing and back office support, objective research, and holistic, cutting-edge financial planning tools to meet your clients' needs. Want to join a winning team and be part of a fiduciary culture where you can do your best work? Then why haven't you contacted us yet? Go to our confidential advisor hub at realinvestmentadvice.com. RIA Advisors. Big enough where it matters, agile enough when it counts.
The Real Investment Show.
Attention Chevron employees and anyone else receiving or considering a company severance package. We know the process can be intimidating. What should you know to maximize your payout? Lump sum or pension annuity, retirement plan rollover or not? What about tax timing your severance? The fiduciary advisors at RIA Advisors can help you make the best decisions for your situation. Call us today at 855-742-7526. That's 855-742-PLAN or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
And now, another page from the Real Investment Advisors Investing Manifesto. A passive investment portfolio requires active risk management. It's not a choice, it's necessity. Diversification doesn't protect against risk of loss. Let us actively help you reach your financial goals with RIA Advisors. Neither bull nor bear. RIA Advisors, 281-501-1791 or online at realinvestmentadvice.com.
You're listening to The Real Investment Show.
Welcome back to the Real Investment Show. Thanks very much for joining us. Before the break, we were talking about young people's participation in the markets and the ways in which they're going about that participation and how they differ from earlier generations. And it is encouraging to see that young people are more involved in investing. A recent article from weforum.org talked about that young people actively investing in capital markets is increasing. 70% of retail investors are currently under the age of 45. Now, young people globally have low financial literacy rates, right around 50%. And we've heard even Treasury Secretary Bessent come out recently and talk about the benefits of financial literacy, and that is something that he's like to make a focus of his term here and trying to increase financial literacy rates. He put out a couple of posts here on X talking about that America has been very good to me, and I want to share the lessons I've learned with others. Through financial literacy, you can build both economic security and peace of mind while moving towards your long-term goals. And I think that is very, very sage advice, and it's often overlooked in our country. And I think that's something that should definitely change. Matt, how do you feel about the financial literacy rates in the country, and what is your experience in dealing with that?
Some people are just natural savers, right? They just wake up and it's easy for them. I don't know if it's genetics or upbringing or whatever it is, but clients that I work with know that I like to start with this as a football, and it never hurts to get that foundational piece built. Mm-hmm. But again, it is so easy, right? It is so easy to just fall way down the hole. I don't remember who posted the comment in there, but somebody was talking about their Amazon budget. You know, I don't know how many clients over the last 3 months, just delete the app.
Yeah.
You know, just take it off your phone. If you want to buy something, fine, but make yourself go to a computer and, you know, cognizantly do it. It's way too easy to sit there and order whatever it is Bezos is hawking that day. But, you know, just you know, and it drips and it goes. You know, it used to be people didn't know where their ATM withdrawals were going, right? They had these stacks of ATM withdrawals that would show up on their bank statements, and it was this leakage of money. You never knew where it was happening. And so they like that. They like that you're not aware. They like that you're just clicking and spending. And so back to the point, you know, I think some people are just built in a way that they're going to take in the money. You know, for the kids that were brought up after the financial crisis of 08, or for example, my grandmother, who was born in, I think, 1912, 1913, you know, she really grew up as a Depression baby. And so it didn't matter, you know, she lived to about 102. And even at 90, we would go out to dinner and she'd have, you know, this much potatoes or this much meat left, and she'd take it home and that was her lunch for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's a different mentality. So some folks, I think, are just built that way. And for those that aren't, it doesn't hurt to go have those classes. I don't know if they're structured, you know. And again, for as much as this might be my last show, you know, Ralph Nader always talked about, you know, and I'm not like a Ralph Nader fan, but that was one thing he always beat the drum about was, where's all these consumerism classes? Where's all these things that we used to have back in the 60s and 70s that taught people the acumen to be able to make these decisions intelligently?
Yeah.
You know, clip coupons or whatever it might be, you know, spend your money wisely. You earned it hard, spend it hard.
That's right. Yeah, and you're right. Some people are just prolific savers. You know, my wife falls into that category. I tell her often, you're going to save us into the poorhouse. So, you know, there's a delicate balance there. And my own grandfather, to the day he died, would stop and bend over and pick up a penny off of the ground if he happened to see a coin on the ground. Just easiest penny I ever made. You know, so that experience that they lived growing up, I think, really ingrained that saving mentality. But yeah, I think that the youth, financial literacy rates among the youth, they are faltering. And to your point, Matt, you know, we used to have much more education around financial literacy in school. You know, I can remember learning how to balance a checkbook ledger when I was in school, and it was interesting. We had financial literacy rates that came out from FINRA's literacy quiz, and it ranked all 50 states here in the U.S. With a score. And unfortunately, Texas, we've got some work to do. We came in at about a 41% on the average financial literacy score, and that has a drastic impact on people. And
Sure.
I thought what was really interesting is they also highlighted, you know, the number of individuals who receive some type of financial education while in school, and kind of broke it down by generation. I think that also shows that more and more we're not seeing that necessary financial education coming in for individuals that are younger generations. You know, I don't know about you, Matt. Did you take any type of finance courses when you were doing your high school coursing?
No, I mean, my activities growing up were always around sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. But I'll mention this from my own experience. You know, my son did Boy Scouts. He's on track, I think, to finish up and get his Eagle, which I'm super proud of him for. But I tried to only volunteer when necessary. To you know, maybe that's a little selfish, you know, but I wasn't ever part of the leadership committee. But they had a badge that the boys had to do. That was around this whole thing, and they had to keep a budget for, I think it was 13 or 14 weeks. I can't remember what the name of the badge was, but I was asked by the scout leader to do it. And, you know, I would come in with presentations and show them about the market, you know, as much as you're going to teach a 10, 12-year-old kid about the markets. But the questions that I would get, it was amazing because, you know, I grew up in a time when, you know, you didn't have credit cards. It was all cash. So it was easy to know how much I'm spending because I can see what's in my wallet.
You feel the weight.
Right. Right. And so the questions that I was getting from these kids, you know, and I don't know what age it should start at or what's the right approach. But, you know, the questions I was getting from the kids, it was evident that even the parents weren't, you know, actively telling them, you know, this is how you do things. So I made a decision at that point where, you know, I got to my kids and I said, look, you know, you have these chores to do, and this is what you're going to get every week if you do that. And then I expect you to save. And I would hand them dollar bills, and I would say, here's your allowance, and I expect you to take 10%. We had an envelope, and I would say, we're going to put 10% of all of that in here. And, eventually my son had enough money to put a nice down payment on a car when he turned 16.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, Matt. The financial literacy really starts in the home, and it starts with what you learn from your parents themselves. And that can have a big leg up for individuals who have that type of financial literacy exposure. I remember being a younger kid, and I have two older brothers. One's 3 years older than me, one's 4 years older than me. So when you're a child, that's a pretty big age gap. And we used to go through the drive-thru, and my mom would, order our food. They'd tell us the total, and then as she pulled away from the window, she'd turn and say, okay, I've got a $20 bill. How much change am I getting back? And I had to try and figure out how much change that my mother would receive by the time we got to the next drive-through window where she would make the payment. And on top of that, I also had to do it faster than my two older brothers who were both older than me. And as much as I'll never admit it to his face, one of them much, much smarter than me. So the
cat's out of the bag now.
He's a smart guy, but he doesn't watch this show. It's too early for him. But I think that, it highlights that foundation really starts with parenting. And so, some of the things that we do for clients in helping to expand that financial literacy for the next generation is involving their children in some of these financial planning meetings. So I don't know about you and John, Matt, but when I'm talking with clients, one of the questions I ask is, what are you doing for your children and helping to prepare them for adulthood? I've even had clients ask, can we bring our son or our daughter in on these meetings so that they can get exposure to the concepts that we're talking about, to the things that are important that they should be focusing on when they eventually step into their own as a young adult trying to make it their own way. And that financial literacy has a meaningful impact. This survey from FINRA shows only about 29% of Americans are actually taking personal finance courses in high school. So for the other 70% of you out there, where are you getting this information? And I think that the first point of contact is always going to be what you live, and what you live, what you learn through your parents first. And I think that if parents take a little more active role in helping to educate their children about what types of concepts are important, the time value of money, the impact on interest, that is the sleeping killer in most American finances, is that compounding interest. Yeah. I think it's going to make a big difference for people. And considering that 46% of Americans failed the quiz on basic financial literacy, that's a staggering number to be facing. I think Besson is dead on right there, that we need to increase financial literacy rates in this country, and that it's going to prove dividends in the long term for a lot of these individuals who decide to engage in that.
Yeah.
So let's see what can we do as advisors to help our clients, prepare their kids for what's happening. We can talk about different investment strategies. I've got a number of clients who actually set up investment accounts for their children, and then they go through and talk about what types of stocks do you want to buy. It really helps to spark that interest. When you tell a kid, what do you want to buy, typically their mind will go to toys, right? Toys, I want a new video game. Let's get something that's a right now short-term satisfaction, but teaching them the discipline of investing those funds for future use and the benefits that will pay in avoiding that immediate gratification. I think that delayed gratification is a diminishing quality in this society, and it feels like fewer and fewer people have the ability and the discipline to focus on those goals over the long term and take the incremental steps necessary to achieve those goals. So much now, to your point, Matt, about buying from Amazon. You can buy whatever you want from the click of a button from your couch. I think that if you're looking to really rein in that Amazon spending, not just going to your computer and buying from another store, but actually getting off of your couch, going to the store and buying in person that thing that you think that you need. And then you might really start thinking, maybe I don't really need this as much as I want it, because there's so much effort I'm going to have to put into getting it that now it doesn't really seem like it's worth it. And if that's the consideration, then yeah, absolutely, you probably don't need it. I think that's distinguishing between those needs and wants is a difficult skill, but it's very valuable.
Yeah. I think there's, for as much as I've experienced the rest of the world, which is, in my own way, relatively small, but, other cultures don't seem to have as much issues around talking about money, and I think we should do better to talk about more money.
I think so. And speaking about talking about money, don't forget to join us tomorrow morning for Candid Coffee. The always insightful Michael Leibowitz will be there with the always entertaining Rich Rosso. We may even see an appearance from Yellen. Who knows? That is tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Central. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you guys have not already. Thank you so much for joining us today on my initial voyage on the at the helm here of Real Investment Show. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I've definitely enjoyed it. Matt, thank you so much. Brent, thank you, and hope you all have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend, guys.